So we weren't going to start here, but since we are talking about the US already, did you guys want to talk about Emma Hayes and the US? And I know criticized early on for lack of rotation, but again, excuse me, Wales FA, she didn't give a shit, right? So she said she didn't care. This is her quote. She said, this isn't a stage to try it out or to experiment. It isn't, I'm afraid, not if you want to win, and I want to win. Go on and look at my history with Chelsea. I played more players than anyone, but not right now. So the fact that she wanted to double down on the players that she thought were the difference makers and that she thought that understood the system that they wanted to play, and in order to get success, she really did double down on that, and it paid off, didn't it, Ree?
Yeah, no, absolutely it did. It's the risk a coach takes, right? You either like rely on your core group and you do some changes around like the periphery or at certain times of the game, or you use heavy rotation and hope that in a marathon brutal tournament like the Olympics that the fresh legs help at the end. So if you win, you're a genius. If you're not, you get, absolutely brutalized. And that happened to her in the tournament, right? Like they had a rough game where they scored in extra time. But Emma is not going to be swayed by public opinion, which is, I think, why she's a great choice for a country that has a lot of public opinion. And she does do what she feels is right. And to win, she's a winner. And, she came in at the exact right time for a team that needed really clear vision, leadership. There's no waffling with Emma. And a deserved gold medal for a team that consistently was able to find a way to deliver.
Signa, what did you think in calling those matches and the semifinal and the final in particular, and how they were able to get it done, and that self-proclaimed triple espresso up top with that attacking trident?
I mean, yeah, like the big three, the trident, the triple espresso, as they call themselves. I mean, I think that was the difference maker. I think Claire might say like Naomi Girma as well, just absolutely spectacular in the back. But I think the three of them up front were just so like pick your poison kind of thing, like players that aren't afraid to go at people. Mallory Swanson was, to me, like, I feel like I haven't seen her play because of just health reasons and in the proper role, to see her kind of like really take command over a game. And they had some troubles though with the late scoring, right? Like I think it was extra time in both the the quarterfinal and semifinal. So there was maybe some question marks, but I just think they were the most together team of the tournament. The most together team on the pitch, like in terms of their play. We'll probably get to that moment about maybe togetherness off the pitch in terms of the Canadian team, but I think I just like the way that they played. I think they probably could have given a little bit more offensively, just given those three up front. But I liked calling it. I liked calling their games. Yeah, I enjoyed especially the first half against Brazil in the final. I think that was like, oh geez, like Brazil, like can you keep this up for 90 minutes? They couldn't. But that was the first team that I thought really gave them a scare.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy to me that those three in Rodman and Sophia Smith and Swanson, like that was the first time that they'd played together. And I'm not saying that Emma Hayes is a genius, but what were you doing, Andonovski, right? Like to not have those three. I mean, I know Swanson's injury played into it as well, right? For sure. But I mean, it just seems nuts to me that this tournament was the first time they were sort of unleashed on the world. And Claire, did you have that same feeling that Signa did about Brazil and calling that game and thinking, okay, we're in for a game here, and then maybe speak to Marta's legacy a little bit in that?
Yeah, I mean, the first half went by really quickly. And that was after, doing the semifinal. I thought we weren't necessarily supposed to do the semifinals or the bronze or the gold. We were supposed to sort of follow Canada. And I'm really glad that CBC had us do all of it, because I think it would have been a shame to just sort of drop the tournament partway through. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to spend 90 minutes ripping the Americans. Well, it turns out I spent 90 minutes ripping the world champions. With Spain's like inexplicable catastrophic collapse. And I mean, like the semifinal for the Americans was mind-numbingly boring. And I think that front three's fantastic to watch, but I think the Americans struggle against really well organized defensive teams. And then I think when they realize they're starting to struggle, then like Lavelle pushes herself farther up and then kills kind of any space they have to work with, and it just sort of compounds it a little bit. So I thought in the final against Brazil, they sort of struck the right balance, and I thought Brazil was great in the first half and made it really competitive and everything. And but just I think the Americans' fitness really shone through in the second half, and they were able to sort of close out the tournament. But so Marta, I think it was so great that she got a medal. I think most people really wanted them to win because of her. And she's just had such a huge impact on the game, and she's had a huge impact on kind of like my career in a way too. She played in the Under-19 World Cup in Edmonton 2002 against us. I've mentioned before how she dribbled around me like I was a traffic cone. I think I said that in the broadcast too.
You don't always have to be so self-deprecating. You can just talk about yourself. Come on.
But like she did. And she was just kind of like this revelation for Brazil that was really, and she was really fun to watch. She made the team kind of, kind of cliche of like the Brazilian flair. Well, I mean, Marta had that in spades, and I think she's just been a very good advocate for the game in Brazil as well. And it's, I think that whatever, I mean, there's that clip of her, what was that 2019 World Cup when they got knocked out? When she made that really impassioned speech about how like, we're not going to be here forever. You guys need to kind of take this on. And it seems like they have, and they've sort of taken that seriously. And I think this team, I mean, they pushed the Americans really hard in a half without Marta, right? And that was so I think Brazil's on a good trajectory. I think she's kind of set them up for that. And I think the game is better for having had Marta participate in it.
Maybe was that the extra little push of motivation that team needed within the context of the Olympics, given her 2-match ban, so that she missed the quarters and the semis and then she was back for the final? Like, do you think that was the extra little lift that they needed?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they just ran Spain off the pitch in the semifinal, and whether or not they needed the extra motivation to do that, or whether or not that's just them now. Right. Which would be great. Like, it would be great for the game. And I also, before I finish, I do want to acknowledge Colombia for getting through to the quarterfinals as the first non-Brazil South American team to make it that far in this tournament. And how well they play. And I said this before, it's like everyone kind of sees, oh, they're a great surprise. It's like, no, this is a good team. And we need to see more of them on a more consistent basis. And I just think like the next World Cup is going to be super fun. That's all I think. It's like, it's really taking off for a lot of teams, and I think that's great. And I've just monopolized this. So
no, that's great. You're calling it, like, as you should. But Rian or Shireen, did you guys want to weigh in on Marta's legacy and kind of where she stands historically in women's football?
I mean, as somebody who's like watched her play forever, like I think one of the things that Marta brought was addressing lack of consistency from federations in support of women generally. And that's the same thing with Colombia. Like, it's not like Cascarino is not the first great Colombian player. Lady Andrade, like, she played before and was spectacular in previous World Cups, right? Like, people remember. But that idea that South America doesn't have the consistency, because we know that lack of support for women's football from federations is a global problem. And, you know, we saw it here, see it here in Canada. It was an issue in the US. It's everywhere, literally. And I remember traveling to Brazil in 2015, and I could not find a Marta jersey anywhere. Like, I couldn't find one. I mean, and that's no surprise, like, to us here in Canada. Like, you just, you know, that's not available. But like, she's such a prolific figure. And people recognize her. I mean, she was known forever as the Pele in a skirt, which is, I don't like those analogies. I think she's just Martha, right? But the fact that I couldn't find a jersey and people like, oh, you want Neymar Jr. I'm like, no, I don't want Neymar Jr. I don't. But what she's done for other tremendous players in her generation and younger, I mean, also she made wearing lipstick is super cool on the pitch, and we all love that. But just culturally, what she's done is bring a joy and a commitment and an understanding. And also the way that she plays is different. The way that she brings a type of style of play. I think understanding that football is really global is important. For a long time, like, you know, Germany and US and dominated the conversations. And like, I personally, looking back 10 years, for me, I used to look to Nadeshiko, like I used to look to Japan, because for me, so what Martha did was sort of expand how people in North America understand football, even though she plays like NWSL, like, you know, she's played in Sweden, she's played all over the place, but she's, for me, and that's really important in the conversation of football, that it's not done in one way. And she's a huge part of that. And like, she will be missed. Her presence will be missed. I was in Australia when she played her last match, and Brazil was ousted by the Jamaicans, and the way that she cried and the way she gave that speech, she didn't go through the mix zone after the match, but people were sobbing. There was like journalists who were like, you know, it's Martha. Like, this is, she's legendary. So there's, you know, it's okay to be in our feels about it. It's okay to have a certain thing about it, because she's associated in the game and like what she's had to. And you three can definitely speak to it, like the barriers and how they've changed and the lack of support, community and otherwise. And I think it's important to remember, although she is prolific, Brazil itself didn't embrace her. There's a tremendous amount of homophobia there. And when I was there, people used to say stuff straight up to me like that. And I was like, wow, this is terrible. Like, you don't know what a treasure you have.
Yeah, because she transcends the game, doesn't she? Like, not only her longevity, but the mark that she's left on the game, the type of player that she is, as you said, Shireen. But I think also in the quality and in the way that she became more outspoken towards the end of her career, what she represents, I think, gives you more of a spectrum for, maybe this is going back to Reen's point about Tom Cruise and like just the reach and expanding the growth of women's football, is that you make it more acceptable, which is maybe like a shit word, but like that women's footballers can look a myriad of ways, can look all kinds of different ways, and that should be celebrated, right?
Moya Dodd told me once, a former Matilda, that Martha is one of the guardians of the game. And that's like a term that stays with me. And I think that she's obviously, I'm not the one anointing that. Like, no, I'm not. I'm just saying that I associate her with that kind of role. Like, she cares so deeply about this sport that it's like, it's inspirational and aspirational, to be honest.
Yeah, and I really think you said something that landed with me, because yes, you know, Claire, Amy, and I had struggles when we were players, just to some of the funding, and she's from Brazil. This is a whole other level of, as you said, challenge. And she was always has been willing to speak up and put herself probably into some dangerous situations back home and her family, because she wanted to do what was right. And so she is a guardian of the game, because she actually epitomizes the women that come from lesser known, that is a football nation, but it's not a women's football nation. And it's almost one of the strongest ones pulling against it, because it's such a traditional men's game there. And there's a lot of traditional roles back in Brazil from every time I've gone there. That must be my feeling. She's, what I would say, and this is going to be my controversial take, is that I do think that the ban or the suspension for Marta helped the team, because she could become something they rallied around, and this person and such a leader for them. But her legs are what they are. She's coming to the end of her career, and when she's on the field, you see moments of what she can do. And even at the end of that US game, she had that moment in the box. But I do think there's a pressure to play her. Huge credit to the coach to not just start her in that last game. But I do think it actually helped them that they could galvanize around something and not have her. Like, I was at this last men's Euro watching Ronaldo, you know, and like, God bless her, Sinky is the reason why Canada soccer, you know, is on the world stage. Incredible player. But you can see when a player comes closer to the end of their career that they have a smaller piece to play on the field, but such a big one off of it. And she did that in spades. And I think the player of the game was Alyssa Nair. I've been critical of that goalkeeper, but she kept that team in the game. And Naomi Girma was incredible the whole tournament, but Alyssa is the one who changed the narrative of that game, for sure, because I think Brazil was the better team in the first half and had some incredible opportunities to put the ball in the net. And Alyssa pulled off some worldies in that game.
Yeah,
Canada is only too familiar with, right? And penalty shootouts. And I wanted to also make sure we talked about, Claire, before I hand it back to you, about Anne-Catherine Berger, who was massive across the entire tournament, much to Canada's chagrin, but also in as they moved on and claimed the bronze medal. But before we move to the soccer piece, and Claire, I'll go to you next, but Signa, maybe if you just wanted to weigh in, because I've heard Diana Matheson talking about the Northern Super League and coming to Canada. That's finally kicking off next year, which is tremendously exciting. But that Canada will immediately be kind of leaps and bounds ahead of some other countries, notably Brazil, because culturally, female athletes, women athletes have been accepted. Like that's never something we've really had to battle against. There are definitely challenges that are inherent to all that, but we're already at a certain level. Do you think that Brazil, being given historically the first Women's World Cup that will be in South America, and now Marta can be an ambassador of sorts, do you think that goes a long way to the kind of shifting the narrative in their country?
I want to be positive about this. I'm not sure I've seen it yet, you know. I think there's a great generation of players. It's not just Marta, it's Formiga, it's Cristiane, right? Like the three names that we know, like if we can call, you know, the trifecta of Brazilian football. But
triple espresso, Signa, come on.
Yes, self-dub. But like, I'm just not, I'm really not confident because they still, I don't think, treat their women's footballers as well. And like they have a professional league there, but you know, the majority of the attention in the professional league is with Corinthians, right? That's where their head coach is from now. Yeah, there's a few years to get things working. And I know that they hosted the Men's World Cup before. And so maybe lessons learned from that. But I don't know. I want to be positive, Amy, but I'm worried about crowds. I'm worried about the support. I'm worried about just the logistics. I'm worried about a lot of things around that. And after such a successful World Cup with the expansion of 32 teams, we want to keep that spotlight on the women's game. And I think it would be amazing if it goes well. And obviously this would be amazing. That federation, as to Claire's point, you know, just seeing like Colombia, you know, seeing Argentina at the World Cup, seeing some of these nations that we haven't seen. You want the global game to spread for the women anyway. And yet Northern Super League, shout out. I'm in Halifax right now. I'm super excited. I don't have my Tides hat on, but I'm very, very excited about how things will get underway. Maybe we can talk about that later, but yeah, that's my thought about the World Cup. Maybe other people have more positivity than I just gave.
No, I don't disagree with you, Signa. I mean, crowd sizes are dependent heavily on, yes, there's culture, but it's also dependent on how much you're willing to put into it from a marketing perspective and how much you're willing to invest in the broadcast of it. I mean, even in Australia, a country that went ballistic over their women's team making the semifinal, not all games were on TV. So on their main networks, everything was streamed. I had to buy a streaming subscription while I was down there to watch non-Australia or non-kind of marquee games. They did not put every game on TV.
Is that how they were billed? Non-Australia or non-marquee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're anyway, so they only put kind of like the really, you know, the Americans I think had some games on TV, but it wasn't all of the games that were on TV. And that's a country that, you know, has the financial means and the enthusiasm to do it.
And the backing for sports, right?
And the backing, and they still didn't get there. So I agree with Signa's hesitancy. I would hope that Brazil's got the infrastructure left over from what was that 2014. So they have the infrastructure to be able to pull it off. But I worry about the investment and buy-in outside of that. And I do agree. I think we'll see Marta in some capacity that like heavily involved. She'll probably just do the entire draw herself, which would be great.
Shireen or Rian, did you guys want to weigh in on Brazil hosting in 2027?
Please.
Thanks, Ree. I love Brazil. It's one of the most magnificent countries. And I'm literally in Prince Edward Island right now. And I think this is the most beautiful place on the face of the earth. Clara might agree because she look at her face. She's like, BC.
I will fight you for that.
Yeah. But Brazil is stunning. It's stunning. It has so many like peleda, like the street ball, like is beautiful there. Like there's just such a passion around it now if they can sort of galvanize that to go behind. And I will say this, Australia will be a tough World Cup to follow just because of the amount of public support that was my third Women's World Cup. And I hadn't seen that kind of support for them. I remember being in France and people didn't even realize there was a World Cup happening. And I was walking around in a Les Bleus kit because I loved them. They were so pretty. And people were like, oh, turn this off. And I was fighting with French people to watch their own team. It was wild. Mm-hmm. But Australia was so magnificent because it was an example of what you can happen if you actually care. And that was like also the media locally and nationally really committing to it. That was, like Claire said, the broadcast and media commitments are huge. And I think that's really important to note as well. Now, will Brazil do that? Will other people sort of take that leap and go? I really hope so. I mean, infrastructure wise, I wonder about those, stadiums in the middle of the Amazon and how much they've been run over with forestation and whatnot. But also, I mean, to be really honest, right-wing governments like Bolsonaro, as we saw previously in Brazil, was not supportive of women in sport and have very sort of right-wing agendas. But where we are now, because that always will affect, how the women's game is affected. I think the Brazilians that we know in the space, though, are so committed to women's football, and love it, but they're not the majority out there. So I think Brazil has a lot of work to do on its own as a host country before we get to that point. And I think it's too early to say. And I like to be optimistic. People think I'm really cynical, but I'll let Sig be like the cynical one today. But but she wants to be optimistic. But I kind of agree. I think that I need to see, because it could go beautifully or it could just tank. And for the generations of footballers we know, of young girls that are out there, I really hope it doesn't. And I hope FIFA really takes this seriously and supports that federation, which gives 90% of its attention to its men. And those are numbers that I'm making up. It's conjecture, but you know what I mean.
I would hazard to say that it's accurate.
Yeah, 82.7 of all stats are made up. And I think it's an important one. I do think because Australia was so enormous, but it was a challenge to watch those games. The time difference was really hard. I'm excited. I think the TV viewership will be bumped. I think it aligns really well with North America, and it's really attainable from Europe. So I do think that's the good thing. I think it's going to grow the game in Brazil in a way that's going to be frustrating because we're used to it being a lot more, full stadiums, et cetera, but I do think that it's so needed in South America, and not just for Brazil. I think of, we talk about these up and down teams. We've played Argentina when they've been amazing. We played them when they disappeared, like Chile, all these countries down there that are just waiting for something to grab onto. And yeah, it might be the minority. It will be the minority, right, that support the women's game or come out, but they need that. It's something that they can grab onto and help grow, and it won't be to the same level that we've seen in European countries, North America or Oceania. But I do think it's time to start pushing the game into these federations that aren't supporting the women, because they're on the global stage, and men like Bolsonaro and all those, we won't get into the politics, but all those people that want to ignore the game can't, because it will be embarrassing for them. And that's, you can achieve a lot when you there's the threat of embarrassment.
And shine the light on it, right?
Shine the light on it. And that's what I'm hoping. will do for that country, and a gift to Brazil to Marta. Sorry, when we talk, by the way, that team is filled with superstars that are there because of Marta and her legacy, and Formiga and these women that, was it Didi that used to play? No, Cici. There's a Brazilian.
Cici, yeah.
Like, they've had superstars for years and years. Thank you. Years that haven't had that platform, but all of these women who have built that game like brick by brick, this is the culmination of that, is to have it at home in front of their families when almost all of them ply their trade abroad. It's a special thing. And some of us have had that privilege to play at home in Canada in 2015, and it's a huge weight, but it's also really, really exciting to have it in your backyard, and the game you love on full display. So I'm actually happy with this move. I think it'll be really good for the game.
I agree. And I was actually fortunate enough to play with CC in Bay Area Cyber Rays, that inaugural year in the WSA. But speaking of shining a light, I thought we could, between the five of us here, maybe talk about our favorite moments. And Claire, we're going to get back to the football. I think you'll be happy to hear. So you were about to talk about either Nair or Burger, or maybe I was talking about Burger.
Sort of both. Sorry. Sort of both.
Way in.
I was specifically thinking, like, I don't want to take a penalty against someone who holds their hands behind their back. Like, hell no. But I agree with Rian wholeheartedly about Alyssa Nair. I mean, that she's also a goalkeeper that I have been critical of. And she absolutely kept them in that game. Brazil was very dangerous in the first half. She made I think there was about 2 or 3 like critical reaction saves.
Yeah, point blank saves.
The point blank that absolutely kept them in the match. I mean, Naomi Girma was consistently probably the star for the quiet star for the Americans, because like, do center backs ever really get credit for being the star? Hold on one second, buddy. Just give me what do you need? Do you need to cut this up? Okay.
No, I don't want any more.
Okay, that's fine. Then you can go to the couch. That's fine. So has consistently been the star for that team, but I thought that Alyssa Nair was kind of the player of the match for them for sure in that final. And it was, it was nice to see. It was a really solid performance from her. And but what was my specific moment? I mean, my specific moment wasn't like a positive moment. It was like watching Spain just dissolve into nothing against Brazil, which was, I mean, as far as a moment in the tournament, it was stunning to watch. And it's not my favorite moment, but it was a moment.
But it's a moment for sure.
It was a moment for sure. And then I just like just a little kind of chef's kiss to the free kick from Japan in the first match against Spain, because it was amazing. And it's just a nice way for the tournament to start. It was beautiful. So,
Signa, did you have a moment or favorite moment, good or bad, from across the Olympic football tournament?
Good or moment? Well, I was going to do like a little inside football broadcast booth for a second. Because if anybody knows, like this, like I wanted to, this is my dream to call soccer at the Olympics. And, but I get very, very nervous ahead of broadcasts. Like, I almost want to get sick. Like, it's not a lie. Like, I actually am so nervous. And so a couple things, like these are my favorite moments because they're kind of connected together. But Claire and I, so we had, this is how our day went. I just wanted to like do the inside football. So our games were not until 3 p.m. So we go for a walk at 7 a.m. and we get a coffee, like a good coffee. Shout out to Claire for scoping out some spots. And then, talk strategy about the game, and then we kind of like go our separate ways and like get ready for but before the game, like I have to have a can of Coke because I need to have like the caffeine and the sugar, and Claire apparently needs to have the sugar because we have these candy cups at in the buffet area that you can get. And so there was like 1 or 2 games where we couldn't find them, and like one of our executive producer, like one of the 2 bosses, we were like, can you find a runner? It was halftime. It was halftime of Colombia, I think, wasn't it, Claire?
I think so. Yeah, it was one of the Canada games.
It was one of the Canada games against France or Colombia. Like, it's pivotal, right? Like this game, and we're like we're in a groove and stuff, but we can't leave the booth. So at halftime we said, do you have a runner, like one of the younger people that work at the network during the games, to get us a can of Coke and to get us some candy cups if they can find them. Anyway, next thing you know, this executive producer, like Paul McHugh was his name, comes running in. We're like, what are you doing here? He just like throws this like basically bowl of candy at us.
Insane amount of candy.
And then like it had like everything. It had like jelly beans, it had chocolate almonds, it had like it was just licorice. It had everything in it. So we were all prepped for that. But
I love that Paul McDougall was your lackey at CBC.
He was our runner.
Like, throwing the hierarchy into disarray.
We met a runner, like not you running, but yeah. But yeah, my favorite moment was like just that being in the booth for the first Canada game. I think in particular for me, it was my favorite moment, just from a broadcast perspective. It was really special to me. It's something I dreamed about my whole life. And to do it with Claire was amazing. My favorite moment, obviously, I mean, it's the Vanessa Gilles goal. I don't know which goal is my favorite, guys. I don't know whether it's the one that like barely like hit the post and went in off her left foot, or whether it's the powerful header. I don't know. I think it's probably the powerful header. Yeah. And then I had this question. Sorry, I'm like rambling on.
It's a podcast,
and I've had people ask
me,
me,
your
like,
boots.
Yeah. Like I had this line and I actually couldn't remember it until after the game. And so I said, from the depths of despair to the quarterfinals. I think that was something like what it was. I did not have that, just for the record, I did not have that written down anywhere. Like I looked at the clock and I said, oh shit, it's an added time. I don't have anything. Oh, sorry.
No.
Oh crap. It's an added time. I don't have anything to say. And this is monumental. Like I got to come up with something. And so like, I swear it was 20 seconds before the whistle went. I wrote down on a piece of paper, I wrote down depths of despair. That was the only thing I wrote down, which can't be confused with pits of despair from The Princess Bride. I was paranoid. I said pits of despair. And then, so I thought like, or, I was like, did I just quote The Princess Bride? But I didn't. And so it just came out, and the quarterfinal part came out. And so that's how it went. But just because I know I've been asked that from a few people have reached out to me and asked. And so that's just sort of how that came about. But that was my favorite. That's, the Gilles goal is my favorite for sure.
Yeah, but I love that about your, like, a peek into your preparation, like what your quote unquote game day looked like. And I'm sure you're not the first person to be heavily reliant upon pop or Pepsi or something. I've heard that Alex Ovechkin has his water bottles filled with Coke during games.
Really?
Yes. Like there's something to be said for simple sugar. Like, yes, simple good sugar, nutrition caffeine. The rest of the time, but like in the moment when you just need that little bit of a lift or a boost.
And my nutritionist said,
stick it in my veins.
You have it with like a handful of cashews. I'm like, okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Even it out,
right? Like just so the blood sugar doesn't come like crashing down.
Mm-hmm. I'm surprised that you were so nervous before. I thought you and Claire were fabulous. It was a really probably the hardest tournament ever to call. So much happening.
There was so much happening.
You guys were great.
I appreciate that so much. I do.
Thank you.
There was like, when we found out about that, it was the night before our first game, and we thought it was a joke. We did. And then it just started getting like, it was like, oh crap. And like our phones blew up in the morning. Like we didn't have any idea the depth of it until the next day.
Well, and it was like multiple news interviews. Like the only time I talked about soccer in the first kind of over the span of the first couple games of the tournament, the only time I talked about soccer was physically during the game. And we had multiple interviews, and none of it was about the game. Nobody wanted to know like, ooh, how does France look? And it was like, it was just this repetitive thing. And it was funny because like we did our broadcast on like the second day, and we were all like fresh faced and jazzed. And then I closed my computer and I was walking to meet Signa, and I like walked across the street to meet her and opened my phone How old am I? But like got a message. Yeah. Just got a message from Kevin, our producer. And he was like, did you see this? And I walked across and I was like, oh my God, Signa. So it was That I found really stressful. And the moments I gave, I feel bad. The moments I gave were like non-Canada moments because I felt like we would get to Canada. But I agree that those goals from Vanessa Gilles felt very cathartic. Like it was, it really, those definitely felt like big emotional release moments. And there were some really cool like photos afterwards of all of them, and just kind of observing the background in the celebrations was really cool. And so yeah, those were also moments.
Sorry to
Pardon?
interrupt, but sorry to interrupt you. Would you also say because we were able to almost turn the narrative a little bit and give the players a platform to speak openly and emotionally, but also from a success, a moment of glory, of redemption, of whatever you want to name that, it wasn't just the moment itself, but it actually allowed us to hear from the players in a way that wasn't despair. It was a moment of true glory of a team coming together. Do you think, I mean, that must connect that moment for you?
No, absolutely. And that was, I found like the hard part about all of it was being a former player and being able to sort of feel that through them, and kind of know how that feels a little bit. Not nearly to that extent, but just being able to connect with it that on an emotional level, and then also having to kind of like speak to everything else that was going on an administrative level. So that was hard to do, but it just, you're right. The narrative change was nice. And it was nice that, I mean, like Vanessa Gilles really kind of took that role of speaking to it publicly really well. And I think was really able to convey how the players were feeling accurately.
I think that's when Vanessa spoke, and after they beat France, it was raw, it was cathartic, it was emotional, but that's when they were kind of successfully flipped the narrative on its head, right? That it was about them and it was about the on-pitch performance. But maybe just to end with this, because I was posed this question and it really stopped me in my tracks because I'd never considered it. But if this kind of external stuff, the scandal doesn't happen, does this team, given their form coming into this tournament and the disappointing World Cup that they had, do they go on the same kind of run to win out in the group? I mean, I know it's not really a successful run because they didn't make the podium again. They lost in the quarterfinals, but they were still able to make it out of the group despite being docked 6 points.
So my dad brought this up, and he said to me, he's like, "Do you think this is the best Canadian team ever?" And I was like, yeah, I think they are. Like, I think that this group, certainly with the performance they put in at the Olympics, and that's, like that's not to say that these are all the best individual talents ever. That's on it. This is the best team, I think. And I think they've been able to pull out some of the best team performances that I've seen from the program. So, yeah.
Just going to interrupt to say I have to go. Sorry, work day for me.
No. Rhian, weigh in.
Say a thing. Say a thing.
Say what thing? Is it?
Do they still go on this run? Do they put in those performances if this scandal doesn't happen?
Does Brazil, without Marta getting us, it's impossible to judge. I think when you have adversity, it is something to rally around, and they did exactly that. I think 2016 was the best team that I remember, but I was a bench warmer. I'm not saying because I was on it, but I don't think we use that term anymore. I was a leader from the sidelines, and I think it is a great team. Though I think Vanessa has that personality. There's a lot that I think was already there, but it was something to rally around. And when you have something to rally around, you see a depth from a team that you didn't know about. So it's impossible, but so wonderful to see you all. And it was another wild ride of a tournament.
Thanks,
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's hear you on this.
So I do, there's some pivotal moments for me, but like as a whole, Olympic wise, and not specifically, although they were reflected from the women's game, is the way that the country rallies around their athletes. Yeah. Now, as a journalist, you don't do that because you have to report the stories. So for me, it's sort of, there's a smorgasbord of things that I thought were really interesting. And one was the way that Canadians wrap around them and protective when they don't succeed. Like we saw it with Jill Moffatt and Rowan and Jenny Kaysen. We saw it with Damian Warner, and we definitely saw it with this team. And that for me, as from a personal perspective, I love to see it. Like I love to see athletes being lifted because they're not like Ellie Black not making the podium, the gymnasts, like, you know, this was, and then there's the wild surprises of those who win gold, and they're wonderful. But that is great. I needed to see from a personal perspective those athletes getting that protection. It's like they cocooned themselves and leaned into themselves as a team because that's what they had to do for survival. And I can't imagine the pressure. And so we're talking about whether or not they would have succeeded. We know that, and this was something that was said to me by someone from Canada Soccer, that they do their best in adversity. This was like disastrous, chaotic collapse. Like, and this came from in-house, so that they did galvanize that situation and dug so deep. But this also, to me, speaks very heavily about their own character. And they, Gabrielle Carl speaking afterwards and wrote a piece for RDS and about that. And even Vanessa Gilles showing the incredible humanity by going, we were crying, we didn't eat, we didn't sleep. Like, these are very huge moments to say those are, and she said, these are not optimal circumstances to compete in this level. And that kind of turn, we talk about that shifting narrative. For me, that's the point at which Canada was like, oh my gosh, we're really angry. Now, the flip side of that, although I love seeing that and it's heartening, the reaction from Canadians towards media reporting on this was crap. And I use capital C with that. I know Rianne's gone, and I don't know if the Welsh FA is still listening, but I will say crap. It was awful.
Know what you want to say. Okay.
You know what you want. You know what I want to say.
Yeah.
Because it was unfair. We're not fans. I'm not a fan, although I support the women's game unconditionally. I have a job. And if I'm reporting on stuff and you don't like it, and like Claire said, for us, and Sig, it's so cool to hear you say about Inside Soccer, your prep. Like Amy and I were just sending each other picture outfits, like outfits of our photos. And like, that's what we were doing in our WhatsApp, like for prep and talking about smart things, definitely. But like, what about these shoes? Do you think I should wear these shoes? And I wear the shoes I wore because I was inspired by Amy. Also because I'm short. So,
and what should we wear for our second game ghost panel? That never happened.
That never happened. And
right.
And
I look great, by the way.
Yeah, you always look great. So there was an element of that excitement because being on a broadcast panel was hugely incredible, and being able, but I also got a chance to flex some muscles and do video essays, which I love. And that's the funny thing. I did write one about this team, but they were on my plan, my editorial schedule. And then I was told, no, don't talk about this right now because this is a mess and we don't know what's happening. Then it was like, no, come back to it. So it was like, you had to pivot and do that. But that role, I really wish Canadians would understand there is a reason why media has to do what they do. And I do think there's a lot more to come out. And it is the jobs of people to do that. We're not that enemy, but we're also like, I'm not in comms and PR. That's not what my job is. Like, of course you're affected as a human being. Do I want this team to win? Of course I do. I'm Canadian. This is the team, but I can't conflate it with what I have to do. So for me, on a personal level, and I can only speak for me, but there were other journalists who were like literally attacked online and abused. Like, and the harm, and I want to reiterate this, that I get online is layered with like xenophobic, gendered Islamophobia, absolutely racist, horrible stuff. So it's like really, really not nice. It's not just, oh, you're stupid, which is, the usual. I get it, of course, decorated with everything else. And that's not great. Nobody loves that, especially when, I was really looking forward to having an Olympics of panels with Amy and Andy Petrillo. But that's not how we started this. And I knew it would be chaotic. How these Olympics started for us in particular was very different. It was hits all day. News wanted to do it. News, can you come at this time? And your head is spinning, and it's day 2 of the Olympics. And so that was, I wouldn't change it for the world. I like the chaos, but it's just to give, if we're doing like an insider kind of thing, like, the athletes are definitely human, but so are the people that have to report on them. And like, you guys did a phenomenal, like all of you, I'm so honored to actually be in this thing. Like I really am. And I say that because it's really smart thought. And there's a lot of intentionality that goes in there. And that's something I'm proud of, is the integrity piece. And so this team, this iteration of this team, for me, is, I agree with Claire completely. I think it's one of the most talented as a unit. I definitely think, and we saw that strength emerge from within, because that for me was outstanding to watch. And I've covered this team for a long time, but to see that was just fascinating from also a sociological level. It was like wild, a study in their tenacity. But yeah, so it's like a lot of things. I'm still processing. I'm eating a lot of ice cream to help with that processing.
How's the
Is it
ice cream in
cow's ice cream?
PI? Yeah.
Oh
is it
yeah,
good?
Signa is going to join me and we'll eat ice cream together. So
Yeah.
that'll
And
be...
I'm just noticing that Signa was talking about not wearing her Tides gear, but you're sporting, Shireen, proudly a Tides hat.
I know, I had some
Did
conversations
it
with
an
people.
hour in and you just noticed that?
No, I noticed it a little while ago, but it was the first time I could really mention it. But I didn't notice it right off the top.
But I'm so excited about NSL. Like I'm so excited. And I had some conversations with my friends, and people don't realize I didn't move to Toronto until for university. So like I'm a born and bred Blue Noser, and I'll always be. But like, do I like, I mean, I'll always support that hometown team, but my hometown team, right? And I've been in Toronto much longer than I have been than I was in Halifax, ironically. But yeah. And this was, come on. I mean, come on. Look how cute it is. Like,
No,
come
it's
on.
awesome. And being a born and
I'm
bred
getting all the
Blue
merch.
Noser is way better than some people I know who are born and bred Brown Nosers, and that's not the same thing, right? So talking about NSL next year and the excitement around it, and then the quality on the pitch with this team. We know high integrity, high character humans off the pitch. Recently come to light that Janine Becky offered testimony as part of that Sport Arbitration Council. So we know everything that she does off the pitch for this team, amongst others who are there representing the team in a various or a whole bunch of different capacities. But where do we think this program goes in the near future, but then also looking ahead to 2027? Like, are they capable of turning the page and finally finding success on the World Cup stage, which is something that's eluded them in the past?
Ooh, who wants to go first there?
Maybe start with the short term.
Okay,
What happened
so-
with the leadership with this team?
Well, I mean, one thing, and I will highlight this about the if you haven't seen the video essay that Shireen did on the women's soccer team, one of the things that stood out was leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that within the team, they have it in spades, whether it's those young, like, can we talk about the performance of Jade Rose at the Olympics?
Yeah.
I mean, to have somebody who, captains your U20 team and like less than a year later is like starring in the back line for your senior team. I mean, that's the kind of trajectory we want to see from the youth system into the senior team. But yeah, leadership within the team, I think, is fantastic. I think the culture has been fantastic. It has been for more than a decade or more. So within the team is fine. I have a really good feeling about Kevin Blue at the helm. I think he is wanting to make changes. He inherited a lot of things that need fixing, and we all know, like, I think things were looking like they were in a good direction after Copa, and then it just sort of the bottom fell out. But I have a good feeling that he has the right intentions of changing things. Now, I don't know what happens now. Like, what are you doing? Like, you have to find a coach. Is it Andy Spence? Like, are you going external? Like, what are you doing? Because 2027 it's really not that far away.
And are you booking friendlies for the fall? Like, when is this team next getting
100%,
together?
100%.
Who's deciding on who comes into camp? Is it Spence or is it somebody else, right?
What are you doing? Like, you can't just have a stagnant program for 6 months or for 3 months. You have to keep going. And so, yeah, I don't know who's taking care of those logistical things in the background. Like, and I mean, and shout out to the team for, like, and the staff, the remaining staff, and like people doing multiple jobs and all of that. And I'm so glad they had their families with them. Not that I know we're still talking about the Olympics, but I'm so glad that this wasn't a pandemic Olympics and they were able to have the families there in the background. So important. But yeah, no, this program can't sit stagnant for 6 months. They got to keep going. So I don't know what they do, if it's an interim coach situation or they're already looking for somebody full time.
Yeah, like I don't think they'll have trouble booking friendlies. People are like, oh, is anybody going to want to play them? Like, yeah, they'll want to play. I don't think that will be an issue. I think you're right. I think getting leadership in position as quickly as possible is important. If they miss the next international window, is it a crisis? No. And I think I would rather they approach hiring in a thoughtful manner, and choose the right, make the right choice, and be thoughtful about that, then sort of rush into something. And I certainly hope that they avoid the temptation to hire to boost the reputation of the program. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they need to hire the right choice and not just this person has, coached at X level or has won this many medals or World Cups or whatever. Like, I think that it has to be, if we know anything about football in Canada, it's not football in Europe, right? Like, it's not the same thing. And it's not the same environment. I mean, it's not the same environment. It's the same game, obviously. But I mean, the environment is a bit different. So you can't necessarily approach it the same way. So you have to have somebody who understands that. And I think that I would hope that they would be thoughtful about it. You're right. I think it certainly can't sit and do nothing for 6 months. But if they had to miss an international window because they hadn't hired yet, I don't know if I'd be that concerned, because all of these players are in very professional environments, right? It's not like they're at home not touching a ball. Like, they're all going back to their clubs and training. So I hope the right choice is made. That's what I hope.
And Claire, you said boost the reputation, but at this point, I think you can separate the players from the staff and the actions of the staff, but it would be to restore the reputation.
Well, sorry. Yes. But I think
I wasn't calling you out and then correcting you, but I'm just saying, like, globally, in the way that this technical staff is seen, like, I think you can paint them with a different brush. Even listening to the Kiwi player who was on with Sam Ewis on her podcast, and she's saying, like, listen, we don't blame the players and all this. And I think that's important, that I think globally in the perception of this team, that they're able to compartmentalize and, like, separate the players from the actions, the unethical actions of the staff.
Absolutely. And I think it's more that sometimes I get the feeling that hiring is done more with the reputation in mind than with fit for the program in mind. I don't know if that makes sense.
Shireen, did you want to kind of have a last word on this, and then we'll wrap on that?
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I don't have much to add except to say that I agree with Claire that the hiring is really essential here in terms of how this goes forward. I agree friendlies are always a great thing to keep it moving. In terms of this particular iteration, you've got young talent we didn't even see. I mean, Smith didn't even come. Olivia didn't even come, right? Yeah. So, like, there is that Sydney Collins got injured, still quite young. Like, there's players that, and again, just Jade Rose, I couldn't talk enough about her poise and her confidence and her demeanor in the back line was just lovely. And I'm excited about that, like, excited to see how that grows and develops. But again, for me, from the outside looking in, it's almost like how they move forward in terms of staff is really important, because Kevin Blue has a tough job to, like, get somebody and make sure it's steady. The ship has to stay steady as it keeps going, but then add people onto it. And, if I was a player, I would be cautious and I would be wary, because, like, don't forget, this drama came from in-house, which is one of the most underlying foundationally devastating reasons. Uh-huh. But to manage that and to help navigate that and captain that ship is going to be tough. And hopefully he'll do it. I like that Kevin Blue is not from soccer. I think that's going to be a bonus, actually, coming into it. Hopefully being able to identify what should work and shouldn't work, and should approach it with a sensitivity, but with like in an intentional way. So it'll be interesting to watch as it goes forward and to see what happens. And I mean, it's just, I'm hopeful, because the caliber of soccer in this country is incredible. And I want that to continue. And one of the questions I kept getting was, do you think this will affect women's professional sport? I mean, no, women's professional sport isn't new to drama and trauma. It's not. So, but I'm excited about the NSL. I'm excited about all these things happening. I just really hope this aligns.
Yeah, really well said. And then in keeping with your ship analogy, I think that Kevin Blue, in not being a soccer person, needs to lean on his crew. You know, that's experts, that's people in the women's game, and it's also the leadership group that showed really well at this tournament, and also probably two really prominent figures in the way of leadership that didn't really get discussed, and that's Desi Scott and Shalina Zadorsky, which I'm sure the players who are thrust in the limelight and were brave and were candid probably had a lot of support behind the scenes. So I think it's important to call those names out as well. So thank you.
I thought you were going to make a Blue Nose reference. And I was like,
I felt like
Signa, the Blue Nose
card.
Signa, the Blue Nose is docked at the pier. So if you want to go down,
is that code for something?
It's here. No, it's like literally the Blue Nose is there. I'm in the Maritimes, y'all. This is all gonna be ship references.
Whenever my boys see any, like, we've seen a bunch of photos of like just regular, like, I don't know, I'm a terrible maritime, like boats, and they're like, is that the Blue Nose? And I'm like, no, it's not the Blue Nose. And they're like, can we see the Blue Nose? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's probably in Lunenburg or going to some tall ship festival somewhere. And anyway, thanks for the tip, Shireen. Thank you for the tip.
That's my journalism coming through, folks.
Maybe Rhonda Brownlee, who always does really creative and original mock-ups for Footy Prime and also for the broadcast, she can put together a Kevin Blue Nose. Claire, there it was. That's what Claire wanted me to say earlier, and I didn't say it because I felt like it was a bit too heavy-handed. But really, come on. I'm not afraid of puns or bad jokes.
Exactly.
Signa, Shireen, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having Shireen, because I'm like speaking for her again, but you know.
Captain, my captain.
The two of you can speak for me anytime, and you guys are welcome back anytime.
Okay,
we're gonna miss seeing you on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I forgot to get one with Ree. I'm sad now, but that's okay. Get a screenshot.
You can do a screen grab.
Cheers for listening and watching, because catch us on YouTube. Go and subscribe there and keep broadening your horizons with these merchants of badassery.
Bye.
Bye.